On the line with me, Senator Glenn Gruenhagen of Glencoe. And Senator, recently Governor Tim Walz was quoted at, I believe it was an education forum or something to that effect, where he said that the country was being taken over by Nazis or something to that effect. And I know when he was confronted on that, he later tried to walk it back and talked about some city in Ohio or Indiana or something where there were Nazis that were trying to, run for government or something. But, you came out with, a article basically saying that, we really don't need that kind of talk at this time.
Yeah, that's correct. It seems like rather than debating ideas, some leaders, and evidently Governor Walz fell into the trap of calling names rather than dealing with issues. And we've got a lot of issues facing our nation and also the state of Minnesota that need to be reasonably discussed and come to effective solutions. We're coming out with a new forecast here of our state budget, and the last forecast in November, we were $5.1 billion in deficit. And hopefully this forecast, it won't get worse, although we're not sure. We'll have to see what comes out today. So we really need to be focused on correcting the two-year budget, discussing issues, and not calling names such as fascist. I think the exact quote is, the country's being stolen by fascists and Nazis. And again, the governor tried to deflect and say, well, I was talking about some small town in Ohio. But then he, being the governor, should have the responsibility to make clear who he was referring to, rather than just making a general statement about running our country, which we know the Republicans at the national level are in charge, and making these negative comments that could be taken by many people in different ways. So I think the governor should apologize. He misspoke, and that in the future he should definitely make his comments much more defined and narrow, if that's what he was actually talking about.
I know that there were some groups, for instance, relatives of those that were killed in the Holocaust that took offense to compare what happened, in Nazi Germany, Poland, and those areas back in World War II to what's currently happening, in Washington, D.C. So, if he's going to apologize, maybe those would be some of the groups he'd like to address first.
Yeah, correct. And we did have a news conference, and Senator Julia Coleman and our minority leader, Mark Johnson, asked for his apology and also indicated some of the negative connotations of making those types of statements to the people who actually suffered in World War II, especially the Jews, and also their surviving relatives. And so again, he has, as governor, he has a responsibility that he's going to make statements like this, which he shouldn't, in my opinion. But then if it refers to some small group of people in another state, he should have added that, rather than just make that statement and then allow people to draw their own conclusions where it applies. I don't think there's too many people in Minnesota that knew anything about a small town in Iowa or in Ohio. Okay, so.
All right. Well, I appreciate your thoughts on that, and of course, coming up later on today, as you mentioned, the belated February budget forecast. We'll see if it matches, what happened, what we saw earlier with, 2026-27 having a bit of a surplus and then a big deficit after that. So I know that, the legislature is, split basically down the middle, both on the House and Senate. So it'll be a challenge for you legislators to work together and try to, address these problems, because they do have to be addressed.
Amen. And the other thing I'd just say, in the last biennium, the DFL had a trifecta. They had the governorship, the House, and the Senate majorities. And they grew government Minnesota government at about 40%, and they raised taxes another 9 to 10 billion. Well, okay, government is an expense on the private sector. So when you grow government at a 40% rate, how do you expect the private sector, which doesn't grow that fast, to pay in enough taxes to cover that type of growth? In the end, you do when you grow government exponentially like that, faster than the private sector, you do more damage than good. And now we've got the economic hangover we have to deal with. And hopefully we can do so on a bipartisan basis and do what's right for the people of the state of Minnesota.
Senator Glenn Gruenhagen of Glencoe. Senator, thanks a lot for joining us today.
Hey, God bless. God bless your listeners.